Oh, hey, Victoria, how are you today?
I'm awesome. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, as always. Now, first question that I ask everybody is, how do you like your coffee in the morning?
I hate coffee. So I like tea. So I will take tea with a little bit of milk and sugar. But my preferred drink is the BCAA pre-workout drink that I have most mornings.
Oh, that's good. That's the very first answer we've had of that. And somebody else who also has BCAAs and know the benefits. Why have you switched to, why do you have BCAAs rather than necessarily tea or coffee?
So I go to the gym in a fasted state. And for many years, I followed a ketogenic diet and I was doing only one meal a day or two meals a day. And so part of the branched chain amino acids, the BCAA, helps the body from consuming its own muscle as well. So and it tastes better than water is another reason why I enjoy it.
No, that's so true. If anybody who doesn't know, not in the fitness world around BCAAs, do look into it, research it. There's not many supplements that are, that a body really needs, and that's one of the ones that really does help and aid performance. Now, speaking of performance, what is it that you do and why do you do it?
I describe myself as a multi-potentialite, and that is because I have such a wide and diverse number of interests. But to make it a little bit easier for your listeners, I am a career-long corporate executive, predominantly in large corporations. However, I have also built and bought my own companies over the years, and I've almost always had side hustles. And so while I am a C-suite executive today, I just took a new role as the chief operating officer for an energy company, which is a newer space for me. So I'm excited about that. I also have a business I've had for many years as a professional public speaker. And I also do a little bit of both personal brand and executive or career leadership coaching as well.
See, that was always the challenge of today's episode, was just like, where do we go? Where do we go from here? But there's always with all of these things, there's always very much a commonality of being a female entrepreneur, and you're in the C-suite level. So you're managing and leading teams. You're also an author. So something we want to mention. And one of your books is on leadership. Now, one of the things I was really intrigued was how you phrase this, which is the new breed of leadership. We're in 2024, so what for the next 20 years is commanding the leadership? What does that look like for the future?
I refer to it as whole human leadership. And that happens to be part of the title of the new book. But it's really just around how much leadership has changed. Certainly when I entered the workforce, and it was much more of a command and control, top down, do not question my decision. Don't talk about strategy and why we're doing it, to this expectation that employees have now. And I do think we saw a huge pivot that helped with COVID. That allowed everyone to reassess not only where they did their work, because we were all doing it out of our homes, except for those necessary workers to continue to work live, but what work we were doing, were we getting purpose and joy and fulfillment out of it, but also who we were doing it for, not just the companies, the actual people. We know that people don't just quit companies, they quit leaders. And so there was all these news headlines of the Great Resignation and quiet quitting. And a lot of that had to do with leadership. And people want to work for leaders who they trust, who they believe have their best interests at heart. And best interests includes developing them for the future, because skills are rapidly, the shelf life shrinking. And so they're evolving and changing. And so that new breed of leadership comes with, yes, still maintaining strong performance expectations and being clear on how success is measured, coaching towards that, but doing it from a place of building genuine relationships with our team members around being, and this is an abused word these days, authentic, but it's also about being vulnerable, and that breeds trust, and also really transparent in how we're communicating. So that command and control goes away. Now, don't get me wrong, we can't we can't open the kimono completely, to everything and tell everyone what's going on, but to the extent that you can, communicating the why, connecting the purpose of the organization and the customers with the work that they do directly, and again, building this amazing engagement with the team in a very different way than certainly generations before.
And you mentioned obviously COVID sped up this change, but why was there this rejection of the command and control type of leadership to where we come to now, where teams need to know the vision, they need to build that trust in order to really be a cohesive, productive team?
I think even if it wasn't a command and control, even if there had been a shift in leadership, there were still these dynamics that existed pre-COVID and more evolved leaders where I must see bums in seats to see that you're being productive. And that trust is so big. People do business with people they like and trust and want to do business with. And so as we sat in our homes, as the world was so crazy around us, loved ones were sick or dying, and we started to think about why the heck am I doing this? And if I'm not having joy and I don't feel value for the work that I'm doing or the people that I'm doing, that caused a lot of this, I think, inner reflection. And a lot of it came back to, I don't like the people I'm doing it for. And they didn't trust me to do this. The reality is the workforce proved they were more productive on the whole while working remotely than when they were in the office 4 or 5 days a week. And so that need for many leaders to see people physically, to equate that to productivity, that's where I think a lot of the questioning came in. And, it was tough. There was no separation of work and home because we worked out of our homes. And so hard to park things at the door when you're in your bedroom working. And so the need to have this real relationship with people and understand what's going on in their lives beyond the 9 to 5. And I know no one works only 9 to 5, but, in learning more about our people, that's what I think COVID helped people start to really be reflective of, because he couldn't escape it as it all came together.
The kind of good analogy I always like to give is we now live in a world where we're completely bombarded with stimulants of either if it's messaging or your phone or it's TV, friends. The list could go on. And if you don't give the brain rest, it's just going to keep being wired all the time. And what actually happened in COVID is we didn't know what we were missing. So because we didn't have that break of, we just always know to go into the office 9 to 5, again quotation marks, office 9 till 5. And if we don't know what it's like to work at home and spend that extra time with family, with friends, it's when you go back to the office you go, oh, this is this whole big thing I'm missing, that now actually I've proven I can have both. So why would I ever go back to the old ways when I can have both and prove I can be more productive? And that trust element from presenteeism, somebody else described this, I won't take it. Somebody else described it. It's almost like now we treat each other as humans rather than adults, rather than children. If you're trying to go hammer down on the presenteeism, well, there's no trust. You're almost acting like they're a child. No, they're fully adults who just need some vision to be then go, well, you tell me what your expertise are. You're going to be far more fulfilled if you've built something all by yourself and you've then achieved that vision, and you're going to be far more intrinsically connected to the company because you did that achievement.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
So COVID was a time where it brought out these stories, where it brought out times of reflection to review, how things were done. But it was also quite a challenging time for a lot of people, and everybody has a story. I have a story, you have a story, everybody has an experience from that time, which we'll be telling the next generation, the generation after. But you've also have a narrative of healthy resilience.
Mm.
What does that mean? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think resilience is another word that's tossed around a lot lately, and that's because we've dealt with so much for sure. But I think people talk about being resilient because they made it through. But what I see happen is, in many cases, it's because they're compartmentalizing. They're not actually processing some of the adversity or the challenge, or maybe it's trauma that's come their way. And I was like that. So actually, as I now talk about healthy resilience, because I have a crazy backstory and tons of both trauma, adversity, and significant challenge. And for me, I was able to deal with it because I didn't deal with it. And so I was very good at just, okay, it happened, let's move forward. And that will come back to bite you in the ass later. And so the reason I refer to it as healthy resilience is because, although I do believe, and there's studies that have proven this, that there are some people who are just more innately resilient than others, but it's like a muscle and you can develop it, but there's things you need to do. And so for me, it's like, I say there's five things you need to do to be resilient overall. The first is just always be clear on the goal or objective, or the vision that you have for yourself. And so whether that's a fitness goal or that's like a work career advancement goal or sales goal, whatever, be clear on what that is. The next is around being really self-aware and self-reflective. We can't control all of the variables. We can't control some of the challenge or elements that are going to come our way. We do have a choice in how we're going to respond to it. And therefore, that self-reflection of, why am I feeling the emotions that I'm having? Why is this visceral reaction? Where does it come from? So spend some time with yourself. Look at the person who's back at you in the mirror. And then you move toward what I refer to as strategic intentionality. So that is then modeling the thoughts in some cases, as well as the actions to move you forward towards that goal. The next is surrounding yourself with like your tribe or your community, the people that will support you. But it also means people who are going to call you on your stuff as well, like identifying where you've got some blind spots. And in some cases, it also can mean professional help. And then the last part of that is permission to fail. So I find people they're sometimes their worst critic and they're so harsh on themselves. So again, stuff's going to happen. Like, we're all going to fail. I think it's important to give yourself time to grieve when it happens, and then anchor back, to the goal or objective. And always just remember, like, one foot in front of the other, that is progress. So for me, the combination of all of those is a way to be much more resilient in a healthier fashion, that, several years from now, you're not like in a pool or a puddle because you never dealt with it.
Now, they're amazing. The 5 top tips. They certainly resonate a lot with all of them. But say you got a person who's not doing any of that, and let's even go with like the point 3 or 4, where surrounding yourself with your tribe of people who are going to support you. If somebody's in a position where they don't have that tribe of people that matches up with their vision, it also means having to get rid of those people to find the tribe that is a more alignment with the vision that you have of yourself and the goals that you want to achieve. That becomes quite a hard decision in itself. So I only point that one out as in, out of all of those, your top tips then, which is the best one to start with that will help gain the momentum to be in that place, that better place?
Probably the self-awareness and self-reflection. Quite honestly, I think, and I actually thank my adoptive mother for that. So I, by way of a little bit of backstory, like, I'm born to a drug-addicted teenage mother who was very abusive to me. And I had a multitude of things through my teen. I was sexually assaulted in my teens, etc. And so I had the unhealthy resilience. I just didn't deal. I just moved forward. I was very, goal oriented in terms of what I wanted to achieve, but I never actually dealt with any of that. And it was my mom, and I, particularly as a teenager, I was like, what the hell, Mom, are you making me do here? Sitting down for hours just trying to understand, why was I having the feelings and the emotions? Why was I reacting out the way I did? I didn't appreciate it until probably a decade plus later. Like, I think I was in my late 20s before I really appreciated that. And I realized, certainly for myself, that's been the single best of the 5 steps that I talk about to help me move forward, is that inward reflection. Like, am I insecure? Am I fearful about something? Like, where does it come from? Because then it allows you to move in that next step of taking with intention, taking action when you come from a place of understanding.
Now, it is known that people won't even do that self-reflection because they are fearful of their own self. They're fearful that they don't want to find out who they are or find out that self-reflection and self-awareness. So if you had your adoptive mother who supporting you to get to that place, and as you just said, you were fighting it because you didn't want to do it, and that's, again, it's just human, it's very natural human behavior. So you managed a decade later to get to a place where you could face it head on. What's your top tip for helping other people to face it head on?
I encourage people to lean into their fear and discomfort. As you said, there are some people who just don't go into that self-reflective place because they're afraid of what they're going to find. And I encourage people to step into that. I don't believe that growth will come and change will come if we don't step into it. There's a favorite quote of mine by George Adair, and it says, "Everything you've ever wanted lives on the other side of fear." So I encourage people to get comfortable with their discomfort.
And I like that this is almost a little bit full circle on your first point sorry, my brain just decided to stop halfway through. I had a really good point there, so I'm going to go back to that in a sec. I put a marker in, so I'm going to edit this out. What was I going to say? What was the first point that you just
leadership
said?
Around being vulnerable? I don't know.
No. I'd never get the flu because then it stops your brain from half working. What's the future of work? What was that last point you just said?
I was just wondering when you say full circle, because I talk about in leadership that it's uncomfortable for many to be this new breed of leader. Is it maybe that?
Yeah, it's definitely the discomfort thing. It's one of my favourite subjects as well, and that's why I want to make sure I get this a little bit right, and I don't usually stop a podcast like this. Muscle. No, go back to your muscle and how to flex it and how to use it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you for that. And I like that we've gone full circle here from one of your previous points, so that to overcome the challenges of fear, and that you have to get into that discomfort, and resilience is a muscle. That's what we're saying here. It is something that can be practiced and can be exercised, and it's something that gets better over time. Now, when we go back into the workplace and overcoming challenges, what would you say is one of the most common challenges in the workplace to come over that could be very uncomfortable?
As I'll say a leader, but I just want to be clear that, leadership in my mind is not purely about title and hierarchy. We are all leaders in our own regard, and our voice is our power. And the way in which we often achieve success and get promoted, or people want to buy from us or hire us, is again about the human connection and trust. And so first in that leadership or bonding piece, it's, what breeds that trust and connection is about talking about some of our lived experiences. It's talking about the things that we value, some of the interests and passions we have, but also understanding what makes us different from others. And so talking about those things in a work context is uncomfortable for many, because I believe too many people think there has to be this complete separation between our professional and our personal lives. Like, we are a whole human being. Like, the ability to separate that is challenging. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some things that you should probably leave at the door, but there's things that make us and can build that connection with others. So I think that's uncomfortable. The other thing, and this is maybe a little bit more macro in the business world, is the way we're measured. Incentives drive behavior that are not always aligned to doing what I'm going to say is the right thing, or without making compromise. So, I'm one who pushes regularly. You can do the right thing, whether it's for the environment, it's for our customers, it's for our employees, and still achieve amazing business results. Like, there doesn't have to be a trade-off for those things. And I've spent a lot of the last many years in Fortune 100 companies, so large public companies that are always looking at the quarter-to-quarter results. And I see far too many trade-offs get made. Don't get me wrong. Again, I think like we have shareholders. And so there's times you do that in certain quarters, but when it's quarter after quarter after quarter, and we compromise our employees or even relationships with long-term customers for some of that short-term gain, that's when I also think it's really uncomfortable for people, is to figure out, how do I align my values and sense of integrity and doing what I think is right with how the company's actually measuring success for me in my role and for the organization as a whole.
What you can divulge from that, can you give examples of that kind of cost benefit, opportunity cost kind of situation?
Well, I'll take something I'm super passionate about, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think many, many companies see it as a little bit of a tick in the box. Hire the chief diversity officer, and we're going to report on some stats, and we're going to go and hire out of historically Black colleges, and we're going to do these things that in many cases I think are performative. And so we see a cost associated with that. And this is where I say doing the right thing of having a workplace that's much more representative of the world we live in is just the way we should be doing business. The data has shown that having not just a diverse workforce, but one that's equitable, we get paid equally for the work we do. I'm scared still when I looked at some of the gender studies around that, but also inclusive. It's safe for people. They feel a sense of belonging. They can feel their whole selves. So it's the DEI and B for belonging. It is all together important. And when you do that well, it is proven that you're going to have better top and bottom line results. People are going to feel more engaged. Higher engagement means longer retention. So they're going to stay with you longer. So a lower cost to replace all of those people. Generally, they're more productive. So you see top line benefit as a result of doing that, and bottom line, profitability in doing that. You, again, you're more reflective of the communities that, your offices are situated in, and the customers that you're serving. So that's an easy one for me. Stop talking about that as a cost measure. It drives solid business outcomes, and business being all of the stakeholders of shareholders, our customers, and our employees.
But you said that obviously when it's done well, it has a very positive impact on the bottom line. But if you're an organization who are doing it as a checkbox exercise, from my eyes and my perspective, you're going to be far less passionate about doing it well. You're going to be just kind of doing what is the minimum required standard to that. And when that happens, it's not done well and does have maybe a negative impact. But what is an example of a half-assed job when it comes to DNI?
I think the half-assed is in two. So at the most senior level, and I've spent a lot of time coaching C-suite executives and boards on this very topic. And I said it does actually need to start from the top. I worked with a global financial services company, and the CEO, I loved, he was trying to move. I think that he wanted this to be part of his legacy around impact. And this was one of the streams around diversity. And I was like, well, then let's start with your board. There's 24 board seats and 2 women. 1 person of color. So there's let's start there. And that's a board is highly influential. But then so that's not a mistake. That where they are currently was a mistake. But then the next is, and where it can become a mistake, is you put people into those roles. And now I'm talking less at the board level, and now actually those in the operations of the business, to have a great website that shows diverse leadership, but you don't actually give them any real accountability and control within it. So then truly it's just a tick box. So that's a mistake, again, often at the top. But then also just at the more entry level, what I see is there's all this focus on attracting, recruiting diverse talent, but then they do nothing to promote and retain them. And so there was one company I worked for, and there was one year, like our entry-level college hires, it was amazing. And it was in a technology company, 53% women. So for tech, that still like doesn't have the same number of women currently in the space. I was like, wow. But then when you looked at the job grade level, 2 or 3 levels higher, once they started to get into management, it's less than half. That's getting it wrong. You've invested all this money to attract diverse talent into the organization, but you haven't changed policies, procedures, the environment, the leadership to create equity and encourage those women or other diverse, employees to stay. And so that is a waste of money.
Wow. And I've, to be honest, from my own experience, I have seen it where you say these phrases. It's like the token person, because then the organization really haven't fully embraced and lived and breathed. And that's exactly what you're saying here, because it's the processes, it's the operations. They've just almost done it as a marketing stunt, because that's the thing that's outwardly facing. And we know when there is countless studies I could actually just regale, when there is a far more gender, the more like balanced gender split, there's a far more mixture of different cultures, because everybody comes from these different backgrounds. They bring different perspectives, they bring in different ideas. And to me, with the collaborative culture, it's incredibly innovating, because you will just think of possibilities that you just would never thought of before. And that's the crux of how we get these positive outcomes. Now, as a as a female CEO and leader, there's many people out there who've just, obviously we've only very touched on your story today, and I'd love to spend more time on it. From that abusive background, that very negative start, you've completely utterly transformed your position in society through resilience and hard work and absolute passion. What are your, from that journey, what has been the things that have aided that motivation, that has enabled you to get into these positions, that enables you to empower others to do change? What are the top tips can you give to other people who want to also replicate what you have?
I just like resilience, I think some of what I've achieved is because of something innately in me. So, and by that, 2 things particular: fight or flight. I'm a fighter. So that call that a little bit of the resilience. I sign a lot of my social media posts with 2 hashtags. One is unstoppable. The other is no excuses. And so nothing is going to prevent me from achieving my goal or objective. So that other thing that's innate is my competitive nature. So some of it's there. But I do think my experience and the challenge and trauma adversities I've had has shaped me. I remember my mom, and my mom's the woman that raised me. She said to me, I think I was 11 years old. And she said, Tori, she says, you need to do better than us. And she meant by education and vocation. She didn't finish college. My dad never went. My dad was a janitor. She was a secretary. So she wanted more for me. And I can tell you, she didn't need to say those words to me, because I was determined to be better than the biology of the woman and her family that I was born into, and the circumstances around me. So that's shaped me to be super driven. Now, a lot beyond that, when I say other things, mindset. So learning how to take some of those healthy resilience practices my mom tried to teach me as a teenager that I didn't really listen to until my late 20s. That's helped me. But also just the no excuses mindset for me is part of that. Drives my older one's okay with it, but my younger child insane. And by that, it's more that, as I said earlier, you can't prevent all of the adversity that's going to come your way, but you have a choice in how you respond to it. Cry your eyes out, be angry, whatever the emotion is when it happens, but move forward and take action. And so I've now been a part of 40 mergers and acquisitions, half of those supporting clients, but the other half have been real. I'm in the mud, buying, selling companies, doing restructure, whatever. That's hard stuff. But a mindset of how am I going to move forward with all of this change and transition, and how do I manage it? Those are some of the things. I mean, there's other elements to my success that I'd say, like I'm an exceptionally hard worker. Like I started working at 11. My first leadership role was at 14. My first executive role at 24. As a brand new mother at the time, I've always had multiple side hustles in addition to so I know hard work. And I've also learned how to, perform. So I was, develop the right skills, but marry that to how they're going to define success as well as like the strength of a strong personal brand to like get me recognized and have people like recruit me, want to work for me, those kinds of things.
I want to just like sit on that just as we kind of come towards the end of the podcast. I think I've been fortunate enough to be around elite athletes and people at the top of their game for quite a number of years, and the common traits for the best of the best isn't, I obviously ask you questions of what stuff do you have there, but actually sometimes it's what's lacking that is the common trait of why some people are just achieve that 1% and who don't, and it's that lacking of not being able to switch off and stop. There's no, like I said, there's no. People will get to a point where they'll go, "Oh, should I stop this?" Start to ask those questions. Should I give up? When actually those questions don't even come to your mind, because it's like, I have to keep going. We have to keep going. I will overcome these obstacles, and there is no excuse to. And I really like that phrase, and I might borrow that one.
Go ahead.
Because I usually say discipline, and it's that discipline to say, if you're going to say you're going to do something and you're going to say you're going to do it at a time or a place, say you're going to do it, and there's only generally ever like 0.001% time where there is a time where you do have to stop, or you do have to, it just doesn't happen, but it's far less than most people think, and it's like having that discipline and coordination to actually just get shit done, at the end of the day. And I'm making this sound so easy, because in reality, when emotions and pressures and everything else comes into the mix, you always have to bring that rational brain in to overcome it, to be like, no, we're going to get this done, and then we're going to make these things happen, and we'll process these feelings even now or in about a few minutes time, but we've got to like you said, just let out the whatever emotions that's coming through at the time, just let it release so that rational brain can just kickstart and get moving.
That's right.
Amazing. I'm going to leave it on to that point there, because I think that's a really good kind of takeaway from today. Victoria, thank you so much for your time and your insight today. I think this has been fantastic, and I hope to have you again sometime soon.
Thanks for having me. It was great.